Okay, Hare Krishna, Mr. Parveen Kumar, and let me put him into the spotlight. Welcome, sir, Mr. Parveen Kumar. He is director of our Institute for Science and Spirituality, and is the trustee for this trust. And he has been leading this institute from last 10 to 12 years, and he's at a very reputed position in a multinational company. So we invite him for today's session. Thank you so much for sir for giving time for today's session, and welcome, and over to you.
Thank you, Indrajit Prabhu, and welcome to all the participants for today's session. And this is the last session for our Discover Yourself series. I'm sharing my screen. Okay, so welcome to the session 4, and the series Discover Yourself. And today we'll be discussing about harmonizing science and spirituality. Okay, so thank you for coming to join this session 4 on Discover Yourself series. And the first we discussed was science of consciousness. Second session was on roadblock to happiness. Third was why bad things happen to good people. And now today the last one is harmonizing science and spirituality. So this seminar is going to be a very wonderful seminar today. And we will understand a lot of our doubts and misconceptions will get shattered in this session, I hope. So this harmonizing science and spirituality. Let us see whether this is the right statement or not. The content of today's presentations are going to be, we'll discuss about the current scenario, we'll define knowledge, what knowledge means, and then we'll discuss about science versus dogmatic science. Then we'll see the reason for conflict, because generally it is seen that the science and spirituality are incompatible. So we'll see that, what are the reasons for that conflict, and then what needs to be done to reform that, finding the harmony and conclusion. Okay, as you know that the science versus God, or the science and religion, science and spirituality. So this is a buzzword today. So if you type in Google science and religion, you will get 16 crore hits in 0.2 seconds. So that is the, these are few of the clippings, like The Guardian, Science and Religion, a history of conflict. Can you be scientific and spiritual? Then in The Scientist, these are all, good journals of science and religion. Then Scientific American, one of the world's most powerful scientists, believes in miracles and all those. So basically, you will find all kinds of mixed literature where somebody will say that science and God are incompatible. Some will say that they are compatible. So we'll impartially see, what the situation is as far as the Indian scriptures or the Vedic scriptures are concerned. If you see the statistics, so this study was done in 2016 by Alan Howard Oakland and David R. Johnson and Stephen Lewis from Rice University, and they studied the religion among scientists in international context. A new study of scientists in 8 regions. So they selected France, United Kingdom, United States, and Hong Kong, Italy, Taiwan, Turkey, and India. So if you see that, because India is important for us, and we'll be discussing the Vedic literatures. So if you see in India, basically 59% of the scientists, they are religious. This is maximum number if you compare with other regions, right? France, United Kingdom, United States, Hong Kong, Italy, Taiwan, even the Turkey, which is considered to be a, Muslim country. And so still the percentage is not, more than India. So what is speciality in India that the Indian scientists are more religious? And similarly, if you see, this study was done in 2009 by the Pew Research Survey scientists. So if you'll see, this is a study in America. Religious belief among general public and scientists. And as compared to general public, 83% of the general public, they believe in God, compared with 33% in the scientific community, and the 18% are kind of, they believe in some higher power. Similarly, this study was done in 2013. The eminent scientist rejects the supernatural, a survey of the fellows of the Royal Society of London. So if you see, the stream A is the physical science, stream B the biological science. And if you'll see, so the question is, the hypothesis was, I believe that when we physically died, our subjective consciousness or some part of it survives. So the maximum number of people, they disagree with this. Similarly, if we talk about God exists, then the maximum number of people disagree. Both the physical and the biological sciences, they strongly disagree that God exists. And similarly, the physical and this, I believe that the science and religion occupy non-overlapping domains or discourse and can peacefully coexist. So in this, you will see mixed response. Some strongly disagree, some agree. Agrees are more than the disagree one, a little bit more. And in between are confused people. So like this, you will see that there is a whole lot of discussions, a whole lot of studies are available, which sometimes they point towards that science and religion or science and spirituality are compatible. Some say that science and religion or spirituality are incompatible. So we'll see why this is so. So Mundaka Upanishad 1.1.4 in Vedantic epistemology. Epistemology means, the epistem in Greek means to know, the knowledge. So basically the epistemology means, how do we know what we know, right? So this shloka mentions two kinds of knowledge. Dve means two. Vedye cheditavya iti sasma yad brahma vido vadanti para cha eva para cha eva apara cha. दो तरीके की ज्ञान को, नॉलेज को बताया गया, right? There are two categories of knowledge to be acquired by the man. So say the knowers of Brahman, the absolute truth. One is paravidya, the higher knowledge, and other is aparavidya, ordinary or lower knowledge. And Bhagavad Gita 13.3 also mentions Kshetra Kshetragyor Jnanam. There are two words. One is Kshetra. Kshetra means the field of knowledge, the matter, and Kshetragya, who knows the field of knowledge. That's the Atma. So these two things, they characterize the knowledge. So Gyan means, according to Bhagavad Gita and the Mundaka Upanishad, also there are many more references. I'm just taking two references. That Gyan means it comprises of the aparavidya, the matter, the bottom approach, the scientific, you can say somewhat similar to the scientific, contemporary scientific world, and the other one is paravidya, or the knowledge related to the soul, spirit, soul, or atma, which is top-down approach. So yes, and similarly Bhagavad Gita 7.4 and 5, 7th chapter, shloka number 4 and 5, it also mentions that similar concepts, paravidya and aparavidya. Not exactly the same word has been used, but in terms of prakriti and bhinna prakriti and spiritual nature and the jiva bhuta. Okay, so the first shloka: earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and false ego, all together these constitute my separated material energy. If you see this slok, bhinna prakrtir ashtada. Ashtada means these 8 are separated material energies. Okay, aparavidya. And then next shloka says, aparayam itastu anyam prakratim vidhi me param jiva bhutam mahabaho yayedam dharyate jagatah. So besides these, O mighty armored Arjun, there is another superior energy of mind which comprises the living entities which are exploiting the resources of this material inferior nature. So this is paravidya. So Bhagavad Gita talks about again the two kinds of energies, two kinds of prakritis. One is material energy, another is spiritual energy. Okay, so what is science? Normally we understand science. So as we take observations, and then with observations, there are some questions come into our mind. we to get the answers to those questions, we develop some hypothesis with, and some of the answers we get based on our hypothesis, our model explanations. Then to test the validity of those answers, we do the predictions. And then we do the testing of the predictions. Some of the predictions may be okay, maybe 100% predictions okay, the theory is proved, hypothesis proved. If predictions not all are okay, then again we do the more critical observations, we again do the cycle is repeated. So in this cycle of scientific thinking, it is applicable to all, right? This is whether the material or the spiritual, everything this comes. So basically this cycle is common. But what happens is, so just a minute. Yeah. So science means this the simplest definition of science is the search for truth and knowledge, right? Then, as we discussed in the last slide, but knowledge means both para and apara vidya, both according to Bhagavad Gita, according to Mundak Upanishad. Complete RAM of knowledge, Shitra Gyor Jnana, like Bhagavad Gita mentioned, we discussed about 7.4 and 5. So the complete knowledge, the Paravidya and the Aparavidya, they combine together. This becomes the whole RAM of knowledge. So that means the science should actually be applicable to, because if science is the search for truth and knowledge, then science should be very open-minded to search for the truth, whether it is a spiritual truth or a material truth. It doesn't matter for the science. Okay. But what happens is, we have developed a lens of materialism or physicalism. It's a philosophical stance science has taken. The current contemporaries, I'm not saying all the scientists, some of the scientists, but because they are prominent, so this view is more visible. So they have taken a lens of materialism or physicalism, which is a philosophical stance. And what happens then? Science becomes basically dogmatic science. Why dogmatic? Because when the scientists see through the eye of through the lens of materialism, they want to study only matter, only aparavidya. They don't want to study paravidya. And then they put a overgeneralization based on the study of the aparavidya, that paravidya doesn't exist. They are not studying paravidya. They have taken the lens of materialism or physicalism. They are not studying paravidya, but their statement comes in very overgeneralization that the paravidya doesn't exist. So this is known as dogmatic science. So then the Oxford Dictionary defines science as intellectual or practical activity encompassing the systematic study of, now see the change in the definition. It's a systematic study of structure and behavior of the physical and natural world through observation and experiment. So if science has defined its limit to the physical and natural world, then science cannot say anything about the paravidya. That is the limitation of science. Because science ने अपनी लिमिट को पहले से ही डिफाइन कर दिया. जैसे आपने देखा है ना कि आपने गांव में देखा होगा कि जो बैल होता है, बैल को बांध देते हैं, है ना, एक रस्सी से, और वो खूंटे से बंधा होता है. अब बैल की पेरिफेरी क्या है? वो उसकी उतनी ही पेरिफेरी, उससे बाहर नहीं जा सकता वो. That limit has been set. Similarly, our scientific community has also set a limit of the aparavidya, and that's why whatever knowledge they produce, that belongs to the aparavidya only. But then they parallelly also say that which is not right, that the paravidya is not correct, or we don't have any proof of the paravidya. That's the problem, because they have taken the lens of materialism. So from the science has become dogmatic, right? So according to this definition, now what we saw, because of that filter of materialism, the science became their aim is the ultimate reality is insentient matter. So the whole science is based on this. They think that the ultimate reality is insentient matter, and everything can be reduced to matter. This is their now understanding, because they have applied the filter of materialism. This is sometimes we have heard this analogy. I don't know whether this is right or wrong. कि जब शुतुरमुर्ग कोई को कोई पीछा करता है, कोई उसको मारने के लिए, तो वो गड्ढा खोद के उसका अपना अपना गर्दन जो है उसमें छुपा देता है होल के अंदर, एंड देन ही थिंक्स कि नाउ आई एम नॉट एबल टू सी एनीवन है, और आई विल बी सेव्ड. But this is not reality. Reality is different. So if science has done something like this, they applied a lens of materialism in front of their eyes, and then they want to see, then they will see everything material. They will not see, even if the spiritual reality will come in front of them, they will ignore that because they have put the lens of materialism. So there's a wonderful YouTube video. This talk was initially banned by TAD, and this is by the Rupert Sheldrake. It's a famous scientist, and he made this video exposing scientific dogma. We will just see 2-3 minutes of this video. Voice is coming?
Yes, but the sound is also good.
Science delusion is the belief that science already understands the nature of reality in principle, leaving only the details to be filled in. This is a very widespread belief in our society. It's the kind of belief system of people who say, I don't believe in God, I believe in science. It's a belief system which has now been spread to the entire world. But there's a conflict in the heart of science between science as a method of inquiry based on reason, evidence, hypothesis, and collective investigation, and science as a belief system or a worldview. And unfortunately, the worldview aspect of science has come to inhibit and constrict the free inquiry, which is the very lifeblood of the scientific endeavor. Since the late 19th century, science has been conducted under the aspect of a belief system or worldview, which is essentially that of materialism, philosophical materialism. And these sciences are now wholly owned subsidiaries of the materialist worldview. I think that as we break out of it, the sciences will be regenerated. What I do in my book, The Science Delusion, which is called Science Set Free in the United States, is take the 10 dogmas or assumptions of science and turn them into questions, seeing how well they stand up if you look at them scientifically. None of them stand up very well. What I'm going to do is first run through what these 10 dogmas are, and then I'll only have time to discuss one or two of them in a bit more detail. But essentially the 10 dogmas, which are the default worldview of most educated people all over the world, are first that nature is mechanical or machine-like. The universe is like a machine, animals and plants are like machines, we're like machines. In fact, we are machines. We're lumbering robots, in Richard Dawkins' vivid phrase, with brains that are genetically programmed computers. Second, matter is unconscious. The whole universe is made up of unconscious matter. There's no consciousness in stars, in galaxies, in planets, in animals, in plants, and there ought not to be any in us either, if this theory is true. So a lot of the philosophy of mind over the last 100 years is trying to prove that we're not really conscious at all. So the matter's unconscious, then the laws of nature are fixed. This is dogma-free. The laws of nature are the same now as they were at the time of the Big Bang, and they'll be the same forever. Not just the laws, but the constants of nature are fixed, which is why they're called constants.
Okay, so it's a long video, so I just wanted to show you. You can later on see this video. So what Rupert Sheldrake is saying, basically, the science has actually become dogmatic, right? So it's not about finding the truth and the knowledge and truth. It's not about the quest for knowledge and truth. It's about quest for dogmatic, some belief systems. So materialism is a belief system, and based on this belief system and based on this lens, their whole theories are based on that we are just machines, and the whole nature is like a mechanical machine, big machine, and we are also machines. right? So this actually is a very damaging to the overall advancement of knowledge. And let's see how. Okay, so in today's world, science is believed to be final authority over truth, right? So what is scientism? This is another belief system. So dogmatic endorsement of scientific methodology as the only way to reality. So what the people, the scientists who believe in scientism or scientism, they believe that the dogmatic endorsement of the scientific methodology is the only way to reality, right? So this is their belief system. So the dominant Western scientific and philosophical paradigm tries to reduce. So because of these belief systems, they try to reduce the superior, the para prakriti, to the lower nature. Like the Francis Crick, the famous inventor of DNA, he stated that, as stated by the majority of the neuroscientists, believe that the idea of soul is a myth. But isn't it a somewhat dismissive overgeneralization? Yes, of course. So has our scientific community become dogmatic? Yes, so the geneticist, the famous Richard Levantine, let us see what he says. We take the side of science in spite of the patent absurdity of some of its constructs, in spite of its failure to fulfill many of its extravagant promises of health and life, in spite of the tolerance of the scientific community for the unsubstantiated just so stories, because we cannot allow a divine foot in the door. This is known as fundamentalism in science. So this is a priori restriction of the scope of science, which militates against the spirit of free inquiry, right? This is not science, what the Richard Levantine or the Richard Dawkins, this is not science actually. These are belief systems. So this is not scientific spirit of free inquiry. So the famous atomic physicist Robert Oppenheimer, he said that in science, there must be no barriers for freedom of inquiry. There is no place for dogma in science. So what happens? What happens with this if we follow the philosophy of materialism? So this materialism will lead to reductionism. What is reductionism? Reductionism means you can reduce the to understand the matter. You go deep, from molecules, compounds to molecules, to atoms, to electrons, protons, and quarks, and finally, then so you believe that you can know about the ultimate reality by going deeper and deeper and deeper into the matter. So this is reductionism. So till matter, this is okay, but is it applicable to the living system also? That's questionable. So, for example, if you see this beautiful small child playing, he has his own emotions, he's a living child, and he's playing, and while playing, probably in his mind, in his brain, he's feeling very happy also. He has his connection with his mother, father. He has his whole life around himself. So what science will say, okay, this is a matter, and this is made up of molecules and chemicals and molecules, which is made up of atoms, which is made up of quarks, forces, leptons, which is made up of the strings, and finally the binary digits. So can we say that this child is basically the 0 and 1 only? Of course, we cannot say that. So this is the fallacy. This is the fallacy of materialistic reductionism. And because of this wrong philosophy, see, you cannot, basically you cannot differentiate between the love of the, these fine qualities, the finer human qualities. Basically, if you believe in reductionism, the finer human quality does not exist. The love, compassion, forgiveness, these does not exist. These are simply illusions in the mind. This is actually the outcome of this materialistic reductionism. That's why this is very dangerous for the world. So Dr. Richard Thompson, he says that the modern mechanistic science rests on the premises that reality is ultimately reducible to a simple set of mathematical equations. Such a view fails to account for two important aspects of reality: consciousness, chetana kahan chali gayi, and the complex biological forms. And so these people think that if you take some matter and you disintegrate into the final ingredients of the elements or the uh, of this matter. So say for example, you have broken one matter into going deeper into the quarks and the strings, and finally, so they says that, for example, if 100 pieces you have done, so you join these 100, then the final product again will be formed. But this is a fallacy. You can study the matter like this, but according to our experience, see the combination of constituents, and when they are combined together, so they are actually 2 plus 2 is equal to is not 4. In living system, it is more than that. How? For example, if you study the chemical composition of this, say for example, this child, you can only study the matter part. You cannot study the consciousness, right? But when everything comes together, mind, intelligence, false ego, body, and the soul, then this child is actually more than its constituent. So this concept of the opposite to materialistic reductionism is basically the organic holism. So this concept is very important. We will discuss in our next sessions, not this because this will become too much for this session, but just wanted to introduce the concept of instead of materialistic reductionism, we should have organic holism. Okay, so this is a Nobel laureate, Professor Zint Georgi. Sorry for pronouncing wrong. Nobel laureate in chemistry. He expressed his despair. He said that in my search for secret of life, I ended up with atoms and electrons which have no life at all. Somewhere along the line, life has run out through my fingers. So in my old days, I'm now retracing my steps. So this happens. So this is a real scientist actually, who is open to ideas, who is open to his, through his research, what he has found throughout his life. Now, finally, he has understood that life is more than the chemicals, atoms, and electrons. So other limitations of science, contemporary science. Science cannot tell us about the moral judgments, what is good, what is bad. Science does not make aesthetic judgments, what is beautiful, what is, good to see, good to hear. So it cannot make aesthetic judgments. Science does not tell how to use scientific knowledge. Also, so they can produce knowledge, but they cannot tell us how to use that scientific knowledge. For example, atomic bombs have been made, but science cannot tell us how to use it. Now the countries have these nuclear bombs, and the whole world is under danger. And similarly, science does not draw conclusions about supernatural explanation, because science already has a limitation that he has put a lens of materialism, so they don't talk about supernatural explanations. And also with these limitations, they also have presuppositions or assumptions in science, as we already discussed. So these are some of the assumptions. So whenever we are doing science, we are studying science, these assumptions are we have made already, right? That's how we are able to, whatever we study in our textbook, whatever research is being done, so these assumptions are already there. A physical universe exists that operates independent of our perceptions. The universe operates according to certain laws which can be discovered. Events have natural causes. See, natural causes, not supernatural, which can be determined according to natural laws. The laws of nature are constant throughout the space and time. How do you know laws of nature are constant throughout space and time? You have experience of maybe the Earth, maybe near to the moon, or maybe Mars, but not the whole universe. So this is assumption. Two contradictory statements cannot both be true. But in spiritual life, this happens, the principle of non-contradiction. So these are all assumptions, because without assumption, science cannot work. Axioms, you can say. So a violation of any of the assumptions of science might mean that some of the major scientific theories are incorrect, or it might not. It might just leave a gap for other explanations. Right? So science has given us answers to many of the great mysteries of the universe, but are they the only possible answers? That is our question. So science cannot do without philosophy, because there are philosophical stances implicit in the presuppositions and goals of any scientific paradigm and in how theories are connected to reality. Okay, so this we already discussed. I will again read. The science cannot do without philosophy. We know that, like materialism is a philosophy, physicalism is a philosophy. So science cannot do. They need to have philosophy to do science, because there are philosophical stances implicit in the presuppositions, like these are the presuppositions and goal of any scientific paradigm, and in how theories are connected to reality, right? It is the task of philosophy of science to critically engage with those presuppositions. So it's a famous Professor John F. Hart, Georgetown University. He mentions about a borrowed view. What is that borrowed view? So the disinterested desire to know, out of which science grows and flourishes. What he says, the first word is very important: disinterested desire. We should not have our own agenda, in doing science. Science is like spiritual life, disinterested desire to know, out of which science grows and flourishes, finds its deepest confirmation in a religious interpretation of the universe. Religions claim that world is finite, coherent, rational, ordered, totality, grounded in the ultimate love and promise, provides a general vision of things that consistently nurtures the scientific quest for knowledge and liberates science from association with imprisoning ideologies. Science, to be more specific, cannot even get off the ground without rooting itself in a kind of a priori faith. कई बार लोग बोलते हैं ना कि जो है स्पिरिचुअलिज्म या रिलीजन में फेथ है, साइंस में कोई फेथ नहीं. साइंस को फेथ के बिना साइंस आगे नहीं बढ़ सकती. That's what Professor John F. Hart is saying. In the last line, I will again read. Science, to be more specific, cannot even get off the ground without rooting itself in a kind of a priori faith that the universe is a rationally ordered totality of things. ये faith लेके चलते हैं. When scientists do any experiment, they already know, they have a faith in their way they have thought कि मैं इस तरीके से experiment करूंगा. This is my hypothesis, how I will design my experiment. So this already he has put his faith कि मैं इस तरीके से करूंगा तो सही निकलेगा. So without faith, science is not possible. And so faith is required in every endeavor. So in Hart's terms, science cannot function without grounding itself in the assumption. What is that assumption? That world is measurable and understandable place, an assumption which religion also proposes. Okay. So what are the conflicting issues? Other conflicting issues are, so generally spiritualism, we say that it's a transcendental concepts, unseen, universal creator, spirit, afterlife, concepts that cannot be proven to exist by modern science. बोलते हैं कि because spiritualism में क्या है, these are transcendental, दिव्य चीजें होती हैं, चीजों को हम देख नहीं सकते हैं. Science deals with the matter which can be seen and measured. तो साइंस को मैं देख सकता हूँ, मेजर कर सकता हूँ, इसलिए साइंस is more reliable than the spiritual science. This is one view. Like Marie Curie, he said that science is measurement and measurement is science. But this is again limitations, क्योंकि वो अपने context में उन्होंने बात की है. इसका मतलब तो love को आप measure नहीं कर सकते. The love as an emotion does not exist at all. So basically these are all actually limited statements. इसी तरीके से if somebody has experience of the quantum mechanics or quantum physics, so there are n number of particles, they come into picture and they disappear, come into picture and disappear. So it's actually basically nobody has seen them, but this is just a concept. So do you believe in the existence of a lepton or a baryon? We ask a scientist. If scientist says that because in spiritual truths cannot be seen, we can also ask the same questions. Have you seen these subatomic particles? No, nobody has seen. So basically, as science thrives on ideas and possibilities, we should understand this. Pasteur, he see the unseen pathogens. Newton's, he see the invisible gravitational force, and then he propounded the law of gravitation. It is not that the law of gravitation was not there. He just got an inspiration. So that is also a separate subject matter to discuss. What is inspiration? How the scientific discoveries are made. So, and then Einstein's imperceptible photons. Einstein has not seen the photons, but he got the Nobel Prize in 1905 for his theory of photoelectric effects, right? So science thrives on ideas and possibilities. This is very important. Science, the scientific method is they make models and then they test the models. Although even the physical reality is not there, still the science is done. Then why the same idea cannot be implemented in spiritualism or the religious life, religious practices? Very well, can be done. So Professor Karl Hempel, Philosophy of Science, University of Göttingen, he says that if science were to study only things that can be observed, researchers would only have a limited range of understanding and a limited account of why things happen. By using theoretical entities in science, researchers are able to gain a much more comprehensive and exact account of the things happening in our world. So science needs, these are important concepts, these are important methods of science. So in many cases, it is only upon theorizing about the existence of an invisible unknown that physical science is properly directed toward discovering it in our physical reality. For example, the discovery of Pluto. प्लूटो की कैसे डिस्कवरी? ऐसे ही तो हुई थी. प्लूटो की डिस्कवरी पहले हो गई थी, देखा बाद में गया था, थ्योरी में पहले आ गया था. So how this is done? This is how it is done in science. Then why we deny that आप आत्मा को देख नहीं सकते हैं, soul को देख नहीं सकते हैं, so that means soul doesn't exist. This is actually जो भी लोग बोलते हैं, even the scientists or whoever, they don't have knowledge. There's poor fund of knowledge, poor fund of scientific knowledge, I would say. They say these kinds of things. Even some scientific instruments are created simply to confirm or deny the feasibility of a theory. So it's a famous physicist, Nobel laureate, Richard Feynman. He talks about the incomprehensibility of the cutting edge branch of quantum physics. And he says that it is absurd. To a normal person, it will look absurd because aapko kuch bhi dikhai nahi de raha, and you are just, working on the equations and equations and equations. So our current physics describes nature as absurd from the point of view of a common sense, and it agrees fully with experiments. So I hope you can accept nature as she is absurd. So absurd other than from why the knowledge is accepted. Because, so I will just read through this. You'll understand. A quantum physics student has to accept on faith, the faith is important here, that the universe is filled with particles that are intrinsically unobservable and undergo training for 8 to 10 years before he can begin comprehending quantum reality. Usko training, he need training. Maybe after 10 साल तो उसे थोड़ा हमने कम ही बोल दिया. Sometimes it takes many years to comprehend the reality कि हम बात किसकी कर रहे हैं. Yet when spiritual teachers ask for something similar, accept the existence of God and train yourself through material regulations and spiritual meditation to experience higher realities, there are a lot of objections. This is blind faith. आप कुछ देख नहीं पा रहे हैं. Why you are saying like this? Be more scientific. These kinds of questions will come up. Objections. Why should I follow any rules? All this is unscientific. So an atheist giving an argument like this is similar to a judge declaring the verdict before even starting the hearing of a case. So this is important. So this now, this slide, this is also very important. Try to hear carefully. So science versus religion or scientist versus religionist. क्या difference होता है? Can anybody tell what is the difference between science and scientist? You can I think because it is little technical this time. So let us discuss also so that can anybody say what is difference between science and scientist?
Sir, may I?
Yes,
Hare
please.
Krishna, Prabhuji.
Yes, please.
Okay.
Yes, please. बोलिए.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. According to me, science is already which is existing from beforehand, which is already existing. From in the past, present, and future. Scientist is what he discovers during the course of time. First of all, he understands the process behind every experiment, and he tries to see it himself through his observation. He makes a thesis. So
Okay.
scientist only discovers things, and science is already existing before that. And religion is a set of belief system which is easier to approach God. Even science, as you said, Prabhuji, is a matter of faith.
Okay, so okay. Anyone else? Thanks.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Hare
Science is a, I feel that science is a fact, and scientist is the person who is doing or experimenting on that fact or discovering something related to that fact.
Yes, okay. Yes, good. Anyone else? This is a very wonderful and important concept. Understand carefully. First, let us see this cartoon. What is written here? You are, so the person is saying, who is the guide of this, so you are completely free to carry out whatever research you want, so long as you come to these conclusions. The conclusion यही आना चाहिए, research आप कुछ भी कर लो. So this is the poor state of science in these days. So basically science जब आप करते हैं, when you do the science and whatever outcomes are coming out of the science, lot of data is generated. Who is interpreting that data? Scientist is interpreting. And then so the via media of interpretation of the scientist, the outcome is declared. So that means if this particular person who is interpreting the data, if he has some bias in his mind, the whole science, whatever he will declare to the outside world will not be the true fact. That's why this is very important to understand this, the concept of science versus scientist. Very important. I'll just read through it. There is no being, thing or a person named science, क्योंकि science तो किसी आदमी का नाम नहीं है, किसी चीज का नाम नहीं है. That can have any sort of intellectual relationship with the being or thing called religion. Science, construed as an abstract entity, neither speak nor thinks. Thus, in a strict linguistic sense, phrases such as a conflict between science and religion or a dialogue between science and religion are meaningless. So what should be? Actually होता क्या है, जो डिस्कशन हो रहा होता है वो साइंटिस्ट और रिलीजनिस्ट के बीच में डिस्कशन हो रहा होता है. साइंस और रिलीजन आपस में गड़बड़ नहीं है. दे आर द स्टोर हाउस ऑफ नॉलेज. प्रॉब्लम ये है कि जो इन दोनों का दिमाग में जो है वो आपस में लड़ रहे होते हैं. However, it is linguistically meaningful to speak of scientist in conflict, dialogue, etc. with religionists. But a project that examines how scientists have interacted with religionists opens up new possibilities. For any particular scientist may have their own conception of science and may also be a Christian or atheist or a Hindu, etc. So a scientist may, of course, reject the existence of God or criticize a religious organization for reasons only partially connected to scientific theories. Science may thus be used to accomplish the personal goals of a scientist with a particular metaphysical or social point of view. Similarly, a scientist or a theologian may promote a scientific theory so as to argue for the God's existence or to eliminate God's attributes. So basically, the बीच में जो ये personal goal आ जाते हैं, that creates the trouble. Right? Okay, so the advancement of science, knowledge is possible. ये चार चीजें हमें चाहिए, है ना? When we have 4 pillars of basic scientific attitudes. Yes. Honesty होनी चाहिए. Whatever outcomes are coming, that should be declared, है ना? उसको छुपाना नहीं चाहिए. होता क्या है कि अगर आउटकम आपने कोई हाइपोथेसिस बनाया साइंस में, आप इसके पीछे पूरा जीवन लगाते रहे, एंड में रिजल्ट कुछ और आया है और आप उसको नहीं पचा पाते हैं, है ना? आप छुपा लेते हैं कि नहीं, लेट मी ट्राई समथिंग एल्स, शायद उससे रिजल्ट आ जाए, रिजल्ट कुछ और ही आ रहा है. ऐसा जैसे डार्विनिज्म में ऐसा हुआ. डार्विनिज्म में, टू प्रूव डार्विनिज्म, देयर हैव बीन मेनी फ्रॉड आल्सो, कि जिसमें उसकी हड्डी एप की उसके साथ जोड़ के दिखाया गया कि देखो ये जो है, दिस इज अ न्यू स्पीसीज, जो इट हैज इवॉल्व्ड फ्रॉम दिस एंड दिस, लाइक दिस. These frauds were done to prove Darwinism. So honesty is very important. Similarly, open-mindedness and skepticism. Open-mindedness भी होनी चाहिए, है ना? Open-mindedness नहीं, अगर close-mindedness like materialism, physicalism है, तो you cannot do science. Right? And then skepticism भी होना चाहिए, doubt भी होना चाहिए, because without doubt, again, how will you, reach the ultimate conclusion? And then creativity is important. So these are the 4 pillars of the basic scientific attitude. While one could have one's view, he should be tolerant of others' views as well and be ready to examine them without any prejudices. So Rupert Sheldrake says, science at its best is an open-minded method of inquiry, not a belief system. That is science. So contemporary science need to be based on right philosophy. अब important question ये आ जाता है, that means whatever science we are doing, that should be based on right philosophy. Agar if you have taken a wrong philosophy, then wrong outcome will come. If you have taken a wrong glass, wrong colored glass in front of your eyes, you will see that color only. So the Professor J.P. Moreland, University of Southern California, he's a distinguished professor of philosophy at Biola University. He says that sometimes people wonder, what in the world philosophy has to do with science? Firstly, science makes a whole host of assumptions, and every one of them has been criticized and rejected. It is actually the task of philosophy to state and defend or criticize the assumptions that science needs for it to do its work. Science cannot defend its own assumptions. That falls to the field of philosophy. Science का काम ही नहीं है, assumptions जो बनानी है वो science का काम नहीं है, वो philosophy का काम है. Philosophy will guide the science. अगर आप science को खुला छोड़ दोगे, that's okay. खुला छोड़ देना चाहिए, that's okay. अगर वैसा भी है, still that is okay. But अगर उसने किसी wrong philosophy को पकड़ लिया तो फिर outcome आपके आएंगे ही नहीं. Right? So what he says that next, the other things that is important is that philosophy can show that there's knowledge outside of science. Many people today think that science is the only field that gives us knowledge, but philosophy can show that there are limits to science and that there are things that we can know, like certain moral, mathematical, and logical truths that are not scientific. So philosophy is important to place limits on science so that it does not gobble up the entire intellectual landscape in a culture. So Einstein also said about philosophy. He said that a knowledge of the historic and philosophical background gives that kind of independence from prejudices of his generations from which most scientists are suffering. This independence, so he's talking about independence from prejudices. This independence created by philosophical insight, in my opinion, the mark of distinction between a mere artisan or specialist and a real seeker after truth. Sir C.V. Raman, the Nobel laureate, India produced. So the 20th century may be the century of science, but 21st century will be the century of scientific spiritualism. That's happening already. So this we saw the conflict part of science. Why the conflict is there? What is the problem? Now we'll see the harmony part of it, and we'll try to understand what is this science, what is this spiritual science. So very important, and probably it may take another 1 hour, but I will try to finish in half an hour. So please bear with me. It's going to be very interesting. Okay. So Dr. T.D. Singh, His Holiness Bhakti Savrup Damodar Maharaj, who was the founder, director of Bhaktivedanta Institute, and he says that scientific and religious paths are like two streams of the creative human mind. The scientific path tries to explain the nature of reality within rationality, whereas the religious or spiritual path does so within rationality. So he's saying within rationality, spiritualism is also rational, within rationality and beyond rationality also. So this is para and apara vidya both, right? This is very important. Now, then Srila Prabhupada says in Srimad Bhagavatam, Vrindavan, there's an audio transcript he's discussing with scientists, and he says that, so this is the Vedic injunction. If we want to understand the science, what is science? It is science. It is not sentiment. Bhakti yoga is not sentiment. Normally लोग सोचते हैं भक्ति करनी है और भक्ति करते रहते हो, भक्ति, हाँ. So it's all sentiment, emotional being. No, it is science. Bhakti yoga is a science. It is not sentiment, Prabhupada says. Therefore, we have to take it from authorized Vedic instructions. Srila Rupa Goswami has advised that science means you have to take it from the Vedic knowledge. Vedic knowledge means there is no mistake, there is no cheating, there is no imperfect senses. Everything is perfect. So science means which is perfect knowledge. प्रभुपाद साइंस का मतलब परफेक्ट नॉलेज ले रहे हैं, नॉट परहैप्स कि शायद ऐसा हुआ होगा या ऐसा होगा. नो, इट मे बी, perhaps it may be. That is not science, that is just a theory. Theory is not science. Science, the most important items of science is observation and experiment. And first of all, to study the situation by observation, and then practically, when you are able to make an experiment, then it is science. Otherwise, theoretical knowledge has no meaning. So Prabhupada accepts that. And he says that Bhakti Yoga is a science. You can make experiment with Bhakti Yoga. You do, your theory is there, and you do the experiment, and you can get the results. So let's go further. Now, this is the important thing. विज्ञान आप सब लोगों ने नाम सुना होगा, है ना. हिंदी में जो है साइंस को विज्ञान बोलते हैं. सो वेदर विज्ञान इज इक्वल टू साइंस और नॉट इक्वल टू साइंस, व्हाट डू यू थिंक? व्हाट डू यू थिंक?
I think Vigyan is science and beyond.
Vigyan is science and beyond. Good.
Like Vishesh Gyan. Not only Gyan, Vishesh Gyan.
Vishesh Gyan. Yes, very good. Yes.
Is it self-realized knowledge?
Maybe, let us see.
Vigyan is doing something related to science and philosophy.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, so let's move further. So Sangeeta Menon, he has written for Oxford Handbook of Religion and Science. She mentions that unlike Western notions of knowledge, this conception, the conception basically in Hindu traditions, includes external and internal knowledge equally, both being understood as necessary for discovering the innate order that underlies reality according to the Rig Veda. In other words, both objective analysis and subjective experience are used as epistemological tools to create an ontology with respect to the rational and emotional. Right? Now, अब हम श्रीमद् भागवतम पे आ जाते हैं. वो क्या बोलते हैं? So in Vedic literature, especially Srimad Bhagavatam, Vigyan is an umbrella term used for practical realization or experience of both material and spiritual knowledge. Whereas modern science only recognizes material knowledge, which can be experienced or measured by physical senses. In this way, science can be said to be the subset of Vigyan as shown in the below depiction. Okay, so science talks about only the material aspects, and Vigyan is the overall, it's an umbrella term, and it includes both the practical realization of both material and spiritual knowledge. Okay. Now, so in text, Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 11, chapter 19, verse number 15, the definition of Vigyan is given as below. So, Etadev hi Vigyanam na tathakena yena yat. So, what does it mean? When one no longer sees the 28 separated material elements. जब हम भौतिक प्रकृति को देखते हैं सामने, तो हम ये 28 material elements को नहीं देखते हैं. तब क्या देखते हैं हम लोग? When somebody, when one no longer sees the 28 separated elements which arise from single cause, but rather sees the cause itself. He sees the cause behind that. जो हम देख रहे हैं उसके पीछे he's able to see the ultimate cause, the personality of Godhead. At that times, one's direct experience, यहाँ पे word क्या आया है? One's direct experience is called Vigyan, or self-realization. Srila Prabhupada mentions in Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd canto, 4th chapter, 30th shloka, the purport, he mentions, transcendental knowledge has 3 departmental divisions, namely knowledge of impersonal Brahman, knowledge of the all-pervading super soul, knowledge of the personality of Godhead. Out of these 3, transcendental knowledge of the personality of Godhead has special significance and is known as Bhagavad Tattva Vigyan. This is the term which has got the real meaning. Bhagavad Tattva Vigyan, specific knowledge of the personality of Godhead. This specific knowledge is realized by pure devotion, service, and no other means. This is the Bhagavad Tattva Vigyan. Okay, now the scientific versus the parallels between Western scientific method and versus Vedic method. Okay, भागवतों में बताया गया है the pramans, direct sense perception, the means of knowledge, inference, traditions, one's own experience and testimony, इन सब चीजों से आप ज्ञान प्राप्त करते हैं. तो भागवतम का ये 11वें स्कंद का 19वें चैप्टर का 17वां श्लोक है. इसी तरीके से 11वें स्कंद का 28वें चैप्टर का 9वां श्लोक, दे बोथ टॉक अबाउट द सेम थिंग, डायरेक्ट सेंस परसेप्शन. तो भागवत ऑल्सो टॉक्स अबाउट कि डायरेक्ट अपनी इंद्रियों से जो हम देखते हैं, दैट इज ऑल्सो वन वैलिड फॉर्म ऑफ नॉलेज. इनफ्रेंस, जब आप अनुमान लगाते हैं, जैसे साइंटिस्ट अनुमान लगाते हैं, हाइपोथेसिस, है ना, दिस इज ऑल्सो वैलिड फॉर्म ऑफ नॉलेज. बट Bhagavatam also talks about 3 more forms of knowledge apart from the science. And science talks about first and second. Bhagavat talks about tradition also. इससे पहले जो ट्रेडिशन में स्पिरिचुअलिस्ट हो चुके हैं उनका ज्ञान है. देन खुद का एक्सपीरियंस, आपने क्या एक्सपीरियंस किया, एंड टेस्टिमनी, टेस्टिमनी ऑफ द स्क्रिप्चर्स, टेस्टिमनी ऑफ द अदर, जिसको बोलते हैं इंटरसब्जेक्टिव टेस्टिबिलिटी है. Testimony, intersubjective testimony. Okay, so now we are entering into the wonderful subject matter of this whole presentation, the scientific method versus Vedic method. So पहला है the red one is the Vedic method, and the blue one will be the Vedic, the scientific method. Okay, the first is testimony. मतलब कहाँ से knowledge generate होती है? First, knowledge generation, है ना, शब्द प्रमाण, scripture से आप तक, who has seen the truth, agam and testimony. So this is, तो Vedic method में these are the praman from where the knowledge is generated. Scientific, science में क्या है? Scientific theories हैं. Testimony of the reliable speakers, they are also dependent upon their own scientific communities. So apt, when I am writing the word apt, it's a Sanskrit word, it means the reliable authority is one who has, मतलब ऐसा ही apt किसी को नाम नहीं दिया गया, उसकी qualifications है, he has seen directly about which he speaks. अगर कोई साधु या कोई ऋषि मुनि भगवान के बारे में बात कर रहे हैं कि he has seen the truth, like वेद व्यास जी ने जब when he got realization, he could see, है ना, भगवान को भी देखा उन्होंने, भगवान के पीछे माया को भी देखा. He could see parayana paraboth. So that is apta, reliable authority, seen directly about which he speaks, or by extension has reliably inferred or heard about which he speaks. पहला. दूसरी क्वालिफिकेशन क्या है आप्त की? Who has compassion or desire to give to other. उसने देखा, अब उसको डिजायर है कि आई वांट टू शेयर इट विद अदर्स, अपने पास नहीं रखता. तीसरा, who desires to make what he knows known to others through speech. So we were discussing about the scientific method versus Vedic method. So we discussed about the Shabd Praman, the first step. Second is the scientific theory. The second step is in case of Vedic method, then you do the spiritual practices, and in scientific method you do the scientific practice, and the third step is experience of reality. In Vedic method, the Vaidusha Pratyaksha is basically the non-sensory perception, which is also known as Vigyan, which is also known as Dhi, which is also known as Anubhav, Prabodh, Samadhi, Prama, Prayojan. All these Sanskrit words talks about the experience of reality. इसलिए जो spiritual life भी जो है या spirituality भी जो है, that is objective. ऐसा नहीं है कि किसको कुछ भी ध्यान में आ गया और जो है वो उसने spiritual, no. It has got its method, proper methodology is there. अगर methodology नहीं होती तो ये इतने बड़े शास्त्र, इतना कुछ जो लिखा हुआ है और फिर उसको और उसमें इतने बड़े ऋषि मुनियों ने जो लिखा हुआ है वो नहीं होता. That is not, it is objective, है ना, experience of reality. और इसको क्या बोलते हैं? वैद्युष्य प्रत्यक्ष. प्रत्यक्ष मीन जो आपके सेंसेस करती हैं, देखती हैं, जो आंख, कान, नाक, जीवा, त्वचा, ये तो भौतिक ज्ञान है. आध्यात्मिक ज्ञान के लिए वैद्युष्य प्रत्यक्ष. वैद्युष्य प्रत्यक्ष मीन्स इट्स अ प्रत्यक्ष बट इट इज नॉन सेंसरी, जो आपके इन सेंसेस से नहीं है, which is coming from the non sensory perceptions. And then realized knowledge, Vigyan, personal experience, can come only after practice, which is mentioned in the text, and only practitioner can verify or falsify the knowledge. और इसमें ये भी है, जैसे साइंटिस्ट साइंटिफिक नॉलेज में हर कोई तो जाके उसको नहीं प्रैक्टिस कर सकता ना, जब तक उसको साइंटिफिक नॉलेज नहीं है, उसने साइंटिफिक प्रैक्टिस नहीं किया है, यू कैन नॉट वेरीफाई. Any normal person. Similarly, in spiritual life also, in you only the person who has practiced it, he will feel. He can verify, he can falsify the knowledge, no one else, है ना. तो लोग बिना स्पिरिचुअल प्रैक्टिस किए बोल रहे हैं ये सब बकवास है. ये लोग जो बेचारा कोई 50 साल से स्पिरिचुअल प्रैक्टिस में है, एंड ही हैज गॉट हिज ओन रियलाइजेशन, स्ट्रॉन्ग रियलाइजेशन, ही हैज सीन द ट्रुथ. और लोग जो है जिसने स्पिरिचुअल प्रैक्टिस का मतलब 1 मिनट का स्पिरिचुअल प्रैक्टिस नहीं किया, well they will say, oh, this is all useless, this is all imagination. So this is actually the dogmatism in science, which I was talking about. Now we'll see the difference between the parallels between the Western natural science and the Western theology or spirituality based on Bhagavad Puran. We'll talk about, हम पढ़ते जाएंगे, जहां जहां पे भी आपको समझ में नहीं आएगा, please let me know. First is objectivity. हम बोलते हैं science is objective, spiritualism is subjective. Let us understand. So objectivity का क्या मतलब है? Objectivity of science means that scientists observe empirical data and report them as they are in order to avoid distorting or altering reality in any way, representing things as they really are. Right? Objectivity is an effort to understand reality as it is. As it is. जो आपने देखा बिना distort किए, बिना उसको, you present the fact as it is. Not simply as we would like it to be, setting aside personal prejudices, distorting emotions, and partisan attachments that might otherwise cloud our ability to understand reality as it really is. This is objectivity. What is Vaishnava theology says? Bhagavad Puran says, objectivity in Bhagavad's view is that the self, the non-physical consciousness, can perceive or apprehend the nature of reality. That is, the true and substantial object, vastavam vastu, through non-sensory perception. This is objectivity in spiritual life. How? This is done through non-sensory perceptions, and this is apprehended through non-physical consciousness, and so which can perceive the nature of reality. और नेचर ऑफ रियलिटी जो एज इट इज नेचर ऑफ रियलिटी है, ट्रू एंड सब्सटेंशियल ऑब्जेक्ट, वास्तव वस्तु को एज इट इज देखना. जैसे जब ब्रह्मा जी कृष्ण को देख रहे हैं, गोविंदम आदि पुरुषम ब्रह्म सीता प्रेयम, गोविंदम है ना, ब्रह्म संहिता प्रेयर्स में, तम अहम भजामि, ही सीइंग द लॉर्ड डायरेक्टली इन फ्रंट ऑफ हिज आईज. Nobody can deny he is not seeing. It's not imagination. That is objective in spiritual life. But it is beyond non-sensory perceptions. Right? This is important. Vaidusha pratyaksha. Rather, I would say that science जो है वो objective नहीं है, because that it only talks about the physical senses. Actual उसके पीछे क्या है, that reality science does not know. Rather, spiritualism or bhakti yoga is the real objective science, because it is actually knowing what is the cause of all causes behind everything. The real vastavam vastu. This is temporary. Whatever we are observing through our material senses, this is temporary. This is not the real truth. This is just temporary, and it will die down. It will disappear after some time. This is temporary, right? But the real vastavam vastu is the Lord. And if somebody by practice of spiritual life is able to see that reality, that is the real objectivity, I would say. Now coming to the disposition. So in science, scientists making the personal claims is or are disinterested or dispassionate. Right? This is very important quality. Disinterested होने चाहिए, dispassionate होने चाहिए. No interest or agenda to move forward, like materialism or physicalism में होता है. They have agenda to move forward. The personal desires and hopes don't undermine objectivity. Scientific knowledge is seen as value free. ये science में. इसी तरह भागवत क्या बोलता है? Bhagavats require that a person having non-sensory perception is detached, dispassionate, having detached intellect, and free from subjectively constructed hopes, wishes, concepts, misapprehensions when examining nature. This is achieved through the practice of bhakti yoga, meditation on God's cosmic body, discriminatory knowledge through Sankhya to perceive reality correctly. भागवतम के ये वाले श्लोक जो है 1.756, 2.1, 225 and 326:12, these all talks about disposition, objectivity, discriminatory knowledge through Sankhya. तो ये जो है, तो Bhagavad talks about the same thing, disposition. Then peer review. साइंस में हमें देखता है कि हम कोई साइंस में अगर नॉलेज जनरेट किया तो रेफरीड जर्नल में उसका रिव्यू होता है. है ना, कि वो नॉलेज सही है या नहीं है. द प्रैक्टिस ऑफ साइंस एंड द एग्जिस्टेंस ऑफ साइंटिफिक कम्युनिटीज आर मेंट टू फैसिलिटेट a dispassionate examination of natural reality by institutionalizing the scrutiny of peers and the practice of being dispassionate towards one's theories. It's a long sentence, but इसमें 3-4 इंपॉर्टेंट वर्ड्स हैं. तो कैसे होता है साइंस का पीयर रिव्यू, कैसे होता है? आपने कोई नॉलेज जनरेट किया, राइट? तो साइंटिफिक कम्युनिटीज बनी हुई हैं, देयर आर ऑलरेडी, द साइंटिफिक कम्युनिटीज आर देयर. वो क्या करती हैं? टू फैसिलिटेट ए एग्जामिनेशन. किस तरीके के एग्जामिनेशन? डिस्पैशनेट एग्जामिनेशन ऑफ द नेचुरल रियलिटी. कैसे? बाय institutionalizing the scrutiny of peers and the practice of being dispassionate towards one theory. भागवत में क्या होता है? Notion of sangha or association with other practitioners who can provide guidance and peer review combined with written records of the spiritual experiences of the adepts is seen as an essential element in guaranteeing objectivity in the practice of bhakti yoga. Bhakti yoga में रूप गोस्वामी जी ने जो है भक्ति रसामृत सिंधु में, when he talks about the 8 stages of bhakti, हाँ, आदौ श्रद्धा तथा साधु संग, तो ये this is objectivity, this is about the peer review, है ना? You can check if by practice of this adau shraddha, you should have the shraddha, then you do the sadhu sangha, then you do the bhajan kriya. If you do the bhajan kriya, then anartha nivritti will happen. These are all, you know, the spiritual experiences of the adepts. So this is all peer review. You can see, हाँ, and it is already mentioned कि आपको ये हो रहा है तो इसका मतलब आपने ये नहीं किया है. ये अगर हो गया है तो you have reached the right stage, now you go to the next stage. हाँ, this is peer review in scientific, in spiritual life also. So it's same as the scientific community. Now paradigms. Paradigms. So point number 1, generally scientists work according to a paradigm or a well-defined system of belief, and that observations are interpreted in terms of that paradigm. Theory plays a role in the creation of scientific belief. पैराडाइम होता है, जैसे सबसे पहले अरिस्टोटेलियन पैराडाइम था, फिर उसके बाद न्यूटोनियन पैराडाइम आया, फिर उसके बाद जो है बेकोनियन पैराडाइम, फिर उसके बाद जो है यू कैन सी डेकार्टियन, कार्टेजियन पैराडाइम. हाँ, ऐसे डिफरेंट पैराडाइम्स में काम जो है होता है. उस पैराडाइम के हिसाब से थ्योरीज बनती हैं, उस पैराडाइम के हिसाब से जो है काम होता रहता है. और कोई थ्योरी उस पैराडाइम को नहीं मैप करती है तो थ्योरी को डिस्कार्ड कर दिया जाता है. दिस इज पैराडाइम. भागवत में क्या है? भागवत पैराडाइम कंसिस्ट ऑफ 3 ontological truth: भगवान, जीव एंड प्रकृति. प्रकृति जो है माया हैज 2 potencies. प्रक्षात्मिका शक्ति, the power to throw the jiva into the ocean of material existence. Avaranitmaka shakti, the power to cover the knowledge of the living entities. By following the process of bhakti yoga, maya's potencies are removed and jiva's experiences darshan of Bhagwan through non-sensory perception by the practice of loving devotional service and gets eternally liberated. This is the whole process, right? This is the paradigm. इस पैराडाइम में जो भी काम करेगा उसका वो जो है he will get the result. इस पैराडाइम के हिसाब से काम नहीं करेगा तो रिजल्ट नहीं आएगा, right? This is the spiritual paradigm of Bhagavad. Now point number 2, observation statements as opposed to theory statements are the vehicle of evidence for objective science. Science is objective because it makes reference to observations that anybody with working senses can have. Objective science deals with observed objects. Scientific statements are intersubjective because the sentences are learned from other speakers who are sharing the observations. भागवत में क्या होता है? भागवत statements are also intersubjective, shared apprehension of the reality in भागवत पुराण. ये हमने डिस्कस किया कि फॉर एग्जाम्पल भागवत में क्या है. एक एग्जाम्पल देता हूं मैं. आई विल गिव एग्जाम्पल ऑफ ऋग्वेद. ऋग्वेद में जितने भी श्लोक हैं उनकी जो अलग अलग रिक्स बोलते हैं, अलग अलग रिक्स के टोटल अगर आप ऋषि मुनियों को देखेंगे ऋग्वेद में 414 ऋषि मुनियों ने ऋग्वेद को बनाया है. और हर कोई ऋषि मुनि एक ही इंटरसब्जेक्टिविटी की बात करता है, इंटरसब्जेक्टिव रियलिटी की बात करते हैं, टेस्टिमनी की बात करते हैं. मतलब ऑल दीज ऋषि मुनीज दे प्रैक्टिस द सेम थिंग. They got the same kind of experience. They discussed within themselves, and they concluded, yes, the reality. This is the objective reality. Everyone is having the same experience. This is known as intersubjective, shared apprehension of reality. यही साइंस में होता है. So it's the same thing. Now coming to the point number 5, the correct apprehension of reality or empirical sense of objectivity. So object of knowledge, इसमें क्या natural world है, यहाँ object of knowledge क्या है, God and self. In this the science here, empirical means the five senses apprehending the physical data. और यहाँ पे जो है भागवत में और स्पिरिचुअलिटी में क्या है, द एम्पेरिकल मीन्स नॉन फिजिकल कॉन्शियसनेस, एप्रीहेंडिंग नॉन फिजिकल ऑब्जेक्ट, है ना. भगवत गीता बोलती है ना 9.2 में, प्रत्यक्ष आवागमम, अवगमम प्रत्यक्ष, यू विल हैव द डायरेक्ट एक्सपीरियंस ऑफ द रियलिटी. इसी तरीके से भागवतम का ये जो श्लोक में येलो में जो आपको दिख रहा है 2931, इसमें जो है श्री भगवान उवाच, भगवान कह रहे हैं ब्रह्मा जी को, यू शुड ग्रास्प व्हाट इज स्पोकन बाय मी, namely the knowledge about me, which is a supreme secret or a highly private, and which is connected with direct experience of me. तो यहाँ भी direct experience हो रहा है, कोई ऐसा नहीं है कि जो है imagination हो रही है ना. The esoteric teaching and the practice is sadhan, means of achieving of them. तो प्रत्यक्ष आवागम की बात हो रही है. तो यहाँ पे empirical physical senses से है, तो यहाँ पे empirical क्या है, non physical senses से. But you प्रत्यक्ष. Second, to be a good scientist, one must have some sort of empirical evidence to back up one's claim. Empirical evidence होना चाहिए. और sorry, this is point number 2 यहाँ पे जो लिखा है. To be a good bhakti yogi, one must have empirical realizations to support one's assertions about reality. हम भक्ति हम लोगों को प्रैक्टिस करते हैं and we discuss. मुझे ये एक्सपीरियंस हुआ, आपको ये एक्सपीरियंस हुआ, तो क्या यस मुझे भी हुआ, और तीसरे को नहीं मुझे नहीं हुआ, तो then कुछ गलती हुई, then you do like this, है ना, you correct your way and you will get the experience. So this is so to be a good scientist, one must have some sort of empirical evidence. So bhakti yoga also, the empirical realizations are there. Point number 3, in science the evidence marshaled is acquired from the natural world. और यहाँ पे क्या in bhakti yoga, the evidence is based on yogic perception of the world, self and God. Point number 4, it relies on the testimony of reliable authorities. और यहाँ पे भागवत में भी rely on testimony of reliable authorities. Same. 5, scientific theories and the practices of sciences are meant to give a true picture of what's happening in the world, despite the way things appear and the way we would like them to be behind the veil of ordinary appearances. True picture हमें मिलना चाहिए साइंस में. और यहाँ पे क्या है भागवत में, the goal of discussion on the natural world in the Bhagavad Puran is to lift the veil of illusion or to show the reality behind the illusion. Same, to know the reality. Now epistemologies, the means to achieve knowledge of testimonies or the words of reliable authorities. So I'll just read through it. Through rigors of scientific method and the internal policing of the members of the scientific community, place scientists in a unique position to objectively study and understand the natural world. Testimony of reliable scientists can be checked, verified, and tested by other members of the scientific community. है ना? क्या चीज बोली उन्होंने यहाँ पे क्या? I will read it. Testimony of the reliable scientist can be checked. आप एक्सपेरिमेंट करना चाहते हैं, आप कर सकते हैं, वेरीफाई कर सकते हैं, and tested by other members of the scientific community, and is guaranteed by the believed technical expertise and academic affiliation of the speaker. Scientists must accept testimony with trust if science is to exist, says Dr. Cody. What is peer-reviewed testimony of trusted people is to be guided by the knowledge and experience of others to ensure objectivity and good science. Theories must be ratified, guided, and reviewed by the members of the tradition. भागवत में और भक्ति योगा और स्पिरिचुअलिटी में क्या होता है? Yogis, by his or her special practice of yoga and community with other yogis, are uniquely qualified to understand the reality and thus an accurate source of information about reality. That is through the testimony of reliable authorities, Aptavachan, and the perception and testimony of the learned yoga practitioner, Vedyusha Pratyaksh. Theories must be ratified. तो वहां पे भी है, theories can be ratified, must be ratified, must be guided, reviewed by the members of the tradition. Same जैसे साइंस में होता है वैसे स्पिरिचुअल प्रैक्टिसेस में भी है ना. और 4.34 का भी ये श्लोक हमने, इट्स वेरी फेमस श्लोक, तद विधि प्रणिपाते न परिप्रश्नेन सेवया उपदेक्षन्ति ते ज्ञानम ज्ञानिना तत्वदर्शिना. तत्वदर्शिना के पास जाने के लिए बोल रहे हैं कि उनके पास जो भी को दे ऑलरेडी सीन द ट्रुथ, है ना. सो आप उनके साथ अपना जो है आप दैट्स अ रिलायबल अथॉरिटी टू वेरीफाई कि मुझे ऐसा एक्सपीरियंस हो रहा है, इज इट द राइट एक्सपीरियंस और नॉट, और आई हैव टू गो फर्दर. तो तत्वदर्शी कैन गाइड यू, राइट. द साइंटिफिक tradition, scientific and Vedic parampara. ओके तो साइंटिफिक ट्रेडिशंस में क्या होता है, अंडर ग्रेजुएट्स एंड टू ए सर्टेन एक्सटेंट ग्रेजुएट स्टूडेंट्स आर रिसीवर्स ऑफ ट्रेडिशन, है ना, इनको भी ट्रेडिशन मिलती है। हम जो अपनी किताबें पढ़ते हैं साइंस की, हमने कभी एक्सपेरिमेंट थोड़ी किया है ना, वी बिलीव दैट इट वाज डन बाय आवर प्रीवियस प्रेडिसेसर्स, है ना, एंड इट इज राइट। हम फेथ करके चलते हैं कि ये सब सही है, राइट तो ये भी परंपरा है, दिस इज साइंटिफिक परंपरा। तो अंडर ग्रेजुएट्स एंड द सर्टेन एक्सटेंट ग्रेजुएट स्टूडेंट्स आर रिसीवर्स ऑफ ट्रेडिशन through hearing and reciting of the testimony of their teachers. This tradition has a history of important individuals, canonical text, methods and practices, institutions that support them. Kuhn refers to the activity of scientists working with the paradigm as normal science, and he saw the job of most scientists at refining and articulating or mopping up the body of knowledge they received through their education and enculturation as scientists. The function of the scientific tradition is to bring people into the field of a particular paradigm, which establishes the theories, ontologies, goals, and methods of sciences. Vedic tradition में क्या है? In Vedic tradition, the transmission of theological knowledge is by the qualified teacher. यहाँ भी गुरु है, तो गुरु की qualifications भी हैं. Who is realized, who is tattvadarshi. He has seen, he has experienced, he can guide. You know, he's free from all the limiting defects of the senses. So in Vedic tradition, the transmission of theological knowledge is by the qualified teachers to the qualified student in an appropriate social environment, and only then the sadhak enjoys the right type of experience or anubhav or vigyan. Vaishnava texts are analogous to lecture notes. Both record the essential points a teacher would discuss with students in person. Now point number 2. When a scientist hears the testimony of their own scientific area and then practices what he or she has heard through experimentation, field work, etc., he or she will have the direct experience of the object or process under discussion. Bhagavad में क्या है? Scriptural testimony in the theologies of the Vaishnava text and the tradition become understood and experienced by the practitioners when they practice what they have heard, and then they will have direct experience of the objects of which the Bhagavad speaks, right? यहाँ पे क्या है? Now point number 3, in sciences there is a sharing of knowledge between teacher and student, between colleague and colleague. In Bhagavad Vidhi, in Bhagavad there is a sharing of knowledge between teacher and student, peer and peer same. Point number 4, in sciences the various theories such as gravitation, genetic heredity, natural selection, etc. are heard in order to help the scientists progress from ignorance to scientific knowledge about the process and the object under study. In Bhagavad also, what is Bhagavad Parampara? The testimony about the cosmic body, cosmogony, cosmography are meant to provide conceptual schemes to assist the hearer to move away from ignorance to self and God and towards knowledge. Point number 8 and last, science and scientist versus tattva and tattvagna. No? Science and scientist, a body of information and a person who has assimilated, understood and realized that body of knowledge. ये scientific tradition में होता है. Bhagavad tradition में tattva and tattvagna, a body of testimonial knowledge, tattva, and a person who has assimilated, understood, realized that body of knowledge is tattvadarshi. So what Srila Prabhupada says now in conclusion, Prabhupada says that, so it is not that this Krishna consciousness movement is a sentimental movement. It is based on fully scientific basis. But people do not understand the science. Probably, I hope now you have understood how Krishna consciousness is a science. They are simply, I mean to say, allured by the experimental science. The experimental science is very limited. Everything is experimental, but we do not know the process of how to make this experiment. Prabhupada ji कह रहे हैं हमें पता ही नहीं है कि experiment कैसे करना है. Can you do experiment? जो any scientist who is not well versed in spiritual life, you know, or bhakti yoga tradition, he cannot do experiment in spiritual life. है ना? So the whole that field of knowledge is completely blank to him. Huh? Otherwise, science means experimental science. Prabhupada, science का मतलब experimental science. अगर आप कह रहे हो कि ये science है, तो it should prove, है ना? But our knowledge, our activities are so limited that we cannot experiment higher analytical process. Higher चीजों के बारे में तो हम knowledge हम करते ही नहीं science. That is not possible. Just like I have several times given this example. Just like there is a flower. The flower is fructifying from a plant, but there is a process. We see all of a sudden in the morning there is a nice rose flower, but we evade the experimental knowledge because we cannot do it. We say by nature. This nature is Prakriti, and this Prakriti is described here Para Prakriti and Apara Prakriti. So this nature is working not blindly, under the direction of Krishna. Just like you have got some energy, that energy you can utilize as you like. Note that all of a sudden the energy comes out from your body and it acts. Suppose you have got the energy to give somebody a blow. This energy is there in your body, but when you desire to use this energy, then it acts. Not that the energy automatically comes out. No. Similarly, this energy, this material energy and the spiritual energy, they are Krishna's energy. And when he likes, he exhibits. Therefore, Krishna says, Maya adhyakshena prakriti suyate sacharacharam. इसलिए भगवान बोलते हैं ये प्रकृति मेरे नीचे काम करती है ना. जब भगवान को उनको उजागर करना होता है, he shows, otherwise it doesn't show. So this is spiritual science. So now in summary will be very simple, don't worry. So the still science will be at best discover only preliminary spiritual truth, not advanced, right? क्योंकि science का limited scope है. Every field of knowledge has its own distinctive methods. To gain advanced knowledge of that field without adopting its method is impossible. For example, अगर हमें अपना weight measure करना है, तो by weighing machine we can measure or adopt a cumbersome process of standing on one side and stacking weights on the other side like this. So you have to adopt the method of that field. Similarly, measuring a distance of a particular star from Earth, either by telescope or experience or impractical process of boarding a spacecraft and flying until you reach, may not live till that time. So this is so we have to adopt a proper method to understand that field of knowledge. Similarly, if you want to measure the speed of fundamental particle, either using particle accelerator or other method, impossible, right? Similarly, just as science has its distinctive methodology, so does spirituality, as we understood, discussed in detail in the previous slides. The scientific methodology can discover some basic principles like existence of soul or God. It can point towards, it can point toward, they cannot prove, the science cannot prove anything. This is also very important. Science cannot prove anything. It points to it, probably this is the right thing, like that. However, only spiritual methods like mantra meditation can enable us to experientially verify advanced spiritual principles like the identity and personality of God. Mantra meditation, or the spiritual, or you can say the applied spiritual technology. Srila Bhakti Sarup Maharaj, Dr. T.D. Singh used to use this word of applied spiritual technology to get higher experience of higher reality. Right. So what do we gain by spiritualism? हमने ये सब discuss किया, just in now closing in next 5 minutes. So what do we gain by being spiritual? First is, it turns out that a private plane would not make me happier. This was research done by Catherine Sanderson, a psychology professor at Amherst College in positive psychology. So he's written in Science of Happiness, reported in Washington Post. He says that it turns out that a private plane would not make me happier. A high IQ, good weather, joy of major or minor life events, high paying job, etc. also cannot make me happier. ये उसके research से prove हुआ है. It also turns out that people who have religious or spiritual beliefs are happier than those who don't, no matter what their beliefs are. So religious beliefs give people a sense of meaning. Similarly, so this study was done in University of California. Being religious or spiritual certainly seems to contribute to one's sense of psychological well-being. Similarly, the Patrick Glynn, Associate Director at George Washington University, he also said, modern research in psychology makes clear that morally unrestrained life is not worth living. The crowning irony is this: even if their beliefs were to be proved illusion, मान लो कोई कहे कि religious or spiritual belief illusion है, okay, तो ये क्या कह रहे हैं कि even if their beliefs were to be proved illusion, religiously committed people lead happier and healthier lives, as numerous studies show. Similarly, there was a study reported in Reader's Digest September-October 2001 issue, showed that people who prayed regularly lived on an average 7 years longer than those who did not pray. The easiest way Srila Prabhupada has Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, when he appeared 520 years ago, and then Srila Prabhupada, who spread this movement throughout the world. So the easiest way to become spiritual is Albert Rushford, who is the hire of Ford Motors. He says that chanting Hare Krishna has made a tremendous impact in my life. So what is the easiest way to do spiritual, to become spiritual, to gain spiritual experience, is chanting this Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. You can chant it. There are no rules and regulation. Anytime you can chant, in any condition you can chant. There are no specific methods. There are no rules and regulations for chanting this Hare Krishna Mahamantra. It is so easy. And just by chanting this Hare Krishna Mahamantra regularly, you will get extreme spiritual experiences very soon. And all bad habits will go away and we'll have. So this book was written by Srila Prabhupada, Chant and Be Happy, Power of Mantra Meditation, in which even the George Harrison, the Beatles group, the famous Beatles group, they recorded this Hare Krishna Mahamantra, and they released this audio at that time, and it became world number one, this Hare Krishna chant throughout the world. Okay, so the conclusion is, let us be spiritual and be happy. Thank you very much for hearing patiently. And it was a long talk, but I think it was necessary for us to understand that this spiritualism or spirituality is a science of science. It's a science of spirituality and Krishna consciousness. It's Srila Prabhupada always use the word. He never, most of the time you will see in the lectures, in letters, in conversations, Prabhupada will use the science of Krishna consciousness. So Prabhupada understood it rightly. It is the real science, actually. It is not illusion. So thank you very much. And I hope